Hi, and welcome to the Capital Forum's 7th Annual Antitrust Thought Leaders Interviewers Series sponsored by KL Discovery. My name's Nate Soderstrom. I'm here today with Scott Sher. Scott is a partner at Wilson Sonsini. Scott, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, on the merger enforcement front, it's been about 18 months since Bacon Delrahim's been in at the antitrust division, a year or so since Joe Simons came in at the FTC. The Trump administration antitrust enforcers are in.
Yes.
What have you seen there? Is it more continuity than change? Have you seen new developments or different approaches under the new leadership? What have you seen on the merger enforcement front?
Right. So I think in a general matter, there's definitely been an uptick in rhetoric around enforcement. I think that there is, at the agencies and outside forces have been advocating for more significant merger enforcement, longer and more thorough investigations, and the hope for more challenges. I think that's been reflected in the administration. You saw, for example, a recent transaction involving Fresenius and Next Stage take 18 months to clear. I think that there is definitely the sense that the agencies are taking very close looks at things, and even when they're not challenging transactions, they're going to look very hard at deals from the beginning until the end, including the remedy phase, and decide exactly what to implement.
Right, that makes sense. And then on the relatively more narrow question of tech deals in tech merger enforcement, and we were talking about this before, every deal is tech in 2019.
Right.
But do you see any new approaches on the tech side, closer scrutiny of things, different approaches, any new developments there?
Absolutely, and I think it's highlighted by the announcement from Joe Simons. I think it's probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago now about the formation of the Technology Task Force. I think that there's a high degree of scrutiny on tech industries. Tech platforms in particular are going to be closely scrutinized, and any transaction that they've engaged in already or might engage in going forward are going to be looked at. And one of the notable things from the Tech Task Force announcement was that the agency would be taking retrospective looks back at transactions, and they actually noted one of them, Facebook, Instagram. And this is completely consistent with the FTC hearings that we had last year. Right. In 2018, there were a series of many hearings where a number of people were advocating that the agencies go back and reevaluate deals where established platform companies were acquiring nascent or potential competitors.
Yeah, and it seems like a meaningful thing to look at, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yes.
Vertical mergers. Maybe the headline or the highlight, you could call it that, of the last 18 months, the AT&T Time Warner challenge, obviously the antitrust division lost in district court and again at the appeals court level. Where do we stand on vertical mergers? Is enforcement, is there more scrutiny now over vertical mergers than there was a couple years ago? What do you tell clients when they come to you and say, hey, can we do this vertical deal?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of things. First of all, I think AT&T Time Warner was a bit sui generis. It was a confluence of a lot of events. It was very high profile. It was very political, and I don't mean political in the sense of Republican versus Democrat. Political meaning that there was a lot of attention being paid to it and what the antitrust division would do there. And then you had Macon, who one has a firm belief that structural remedies are better than and more successful than behavioral remedies. And you also had his perception and some people's perception that the remedy in NBC Comcast did not work, and that was a monitoring remedy. So I would say that AT&T Time Warner was a specific set of facts that led to the division's decision to challenge.
So you think maybe it was more a unique one-off event than maybe a trend where we're going to see a bunch of full-stop verticals?
So it's a great question, and I think the answer is that there's going to be more scrutiny on vertical deals, and I think it is as a result of AT&T Time Warner, but Macon has also expressed some degree of skepticism about some of the efficiencies associated with vertical mergers. Like he says that, we really need to look at whether or not double marginalization is really an efficiency of a vertical merger. So I think that we are going to see more scrutiny on claims of efficiencies and synergies in vertical deals, which, just to go on for a second, in tech deals, to me, that's particularly concerning, and you asked me what I tell my clients. A lot of tech deals are vertical in nature, particularly for platform companies. They're not acquiring a platform competitor in most instances. They're acquiring something to go on top of the platform. And I think that in those instances, those platform companies are doing it because they're making a substantial buy versus build decision. And they think that they can get a technology out to market more quickly, better if they buy rather than build. And I think that those are going to suffer from a degree of higher scrutiny from the agencies.
Yeah, that makes sense. On the efficiencies point, so I think there are two schools of thought about this as far as AT&T Time Warner, because some people will say, hey, this was great because when the division challenged, they recognized some of these efficiencies and Shapiro built it into his model. Hey, there's going to be this amount of cost savings, this amount will be passed through.
Right.
This is the division for maybe not the first time, but an important time, recognizing at least some degree of efficiency savings through the deal. The counterpoint to that is, hey, they sued anyway. They were skeptical of the other efficiencies. I mean, do you see AT&T Time Warner and with recognizing that the decision probably doesn't tell us a ton about how courts are going to think about these efficiencies? Did you see that challenge is actually, because again, there's a school of thought, hey, because the antitrust division actually recognized some efficiencies here, that it actually is good for future vertical deals when you're making these efficiency arguments?
No, I don't think so. I do think that efficiencies are going to be continued to look on skeptically by the agencies. It's unfortunate. There's always been a hostility towards efficiencies defenses and synergies defenses, and it starts at the agencies and it runs through the courts. So you have decisions like St. Luke's out of the Ninth Circuit, where the Ninth Circuit ostensibly said that efficiencies defenses are almost never or never should be recognized. So I think there's a continued hostility towards efficiencies defenses, and I do think that the division, particularly in vertical deals, is going to be more skeptical, notwithstanding what Shapiro's report said in AT&T.
Right. That makes sense. So another thing you alluded to was behavioral remedies, and obviously Macon has been, we'll say, very skeptical of behavioral remedies. The FTC has cleared a few deals in the last number of months, Orbital ATK and Stable Descendant as well, with some behavioral conditions. What do you tell clients there? It seems like there's some kind of split between the FTC and DOJ, what they'll do as far as behavioral remedies. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Absolutely, it depends whether or not you're a DOJ or FTC industry right now, and I think that's unfortunate, particularly for a lot of my clients who don't know whether or not they're a DOJ or FTC industry, because there's often a clearance fight involving tech companies. But there's absolutely a difference. I think where a remedy is a firewall remedy, I think that the FTC, you mentioned Orbital and Ascendant, I think that those are two clear examples that the FTC accepted a firewall remedy. The DOJ has suggested firewall remedies are likely insufficient, and divestiture is going to be required in those instances where a firewall might be necessary. The DOJ just seems to be extremely skeptical of a continued monitoring role in merger enforcement. And again, I don't know whether or not that means more vertical deals will be challenged. It could mean that fewer vertical deals are challenged because the agency is not going to want to challenge a deal with just one minor vertical problem.
Right. Well, I think if you look at CVS Aetna and Cigna Express Scripts, I think there were arguments for firewalls in both those deals, and they cleared, Cigna Express unconditionally, and CVS Aetna Part B, but nothing on the firewall side. The firewall is interesting because, again, non-discrimination pledges, pricing pledges, I get why those would be really tough to monitor and probably ineffective. Firewalls seem like the one behavioral condition where at least a lot of folks on the defense side say, look, this is very, very doable, and there's no reason to throw, the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I think that you have to ask yourself a number of questions in a firewall remedy. One, what is the sophistication of the customers whose data needs to be firewalled? If it's individual or personal, it might be more difficult to monitor because you don't have a sophisticated third party looking over a shoulder. But if you have the government, if the government is the company that needs to have the firewall, or sophisticated large businesses need to have the firewall, I think that you can say that you can expect with a mediator or an arbitrator that a firewall should in most instances be successful. And I think the other thing that you need to look at is whether or not in that industry firewalls are common or not. And if they're working commercially, then one should assume that they should continue working commercially, even with a DOJ or FTC consent.
That makes a lot of sense. To move from behavioral remedies to structural remedies, and you alluded to next stage, but it seems like there are a lot of deals, especially at the FTC, maybe the antitrust division as well, long time to close, long time to negotiate a consent. I don't know if this is a trend that started in 2015, 2016. I don't know if this is accelerated under the new leadership at the agencies, but structural remedies seem to be taking forever.
Yes.
What are you seeing there? Has it even accelerated on the timing side? Accelerate is the wrong word. Is it taking even longer than it would have been a couple years ago? What are you seeing there?
Absolutely. I think you have to look at 2015 and 16 as a little bit different because you had only 2 commissioners for a long period of time. That's not the same as having a full commission. And then having a full commission in a new administration where you have 4 commissioners turnover is going to naturally cause some degree of time lag because people are getting acclimated to their new jobs and getting acclimated into whatever deals are in the pipeline. But I think that there are a number of reasons why deals are taking longer. And this is, I think, a long-term trend, not a short-term blip. The first is that there seems to be a strong will, at least on behalf of 2 of the commissioners, to be far more aggressive in merger challenge. So you have Commissioner Chopra and Commissioner Slaughter, both of who have dissented in 2 recent merger challenges in the next stage deal and in the ascendant deal. And they're calling for far more significant merger enforcement. And I think that is naturally going to gum up the process some, particularly to the extent that the chairman is willing to give them some rope to explore whatever avenues they want to explore. It will absolutely extend the period of review. I think the other issue that we have that's equally significant and long-term is that both agencies, and in particular the FTC, the issue of who the buyer is becoming a much more important focus. In some part due to some perceived failures in remedies, because either the buyer wasn't large or sophisticated enough to make the purchase, or because it turned out that the buyer had no interest in continuing to cultivate the business or perception. I think that buyers are going to be looked at more skeptically. I think that if you're trying to buy something where an agency can say maybe you're biting off more than you can chew, I think that you're going to be looked at skeptically. And I think that as a class of buyers, PE buyers are going to be looked at more skeptically, simply because there's a perception that a PE buyer is more interested in quote unquote milking the cow as opposed to really reinvesting in R&D. Right. So from my perspective, what do I tell those clients? I tell them you really need to have a substantial, solid business plan for what you intend to do with the assets going forward. And it better be believable by the agencies, or else you're going to be held up, or you're going to be looked at very skeptically, or in the worst case scenario, you're not going to be approved as a buyer. Right.
That seems pretty significant. I mean, it's an interesting thing on the timing because Macon came out a few months ago and says, look, we're going to try to get these reviews wrapped up in 6 months. And I don't know if it was Macon or Finch or somebody, but they said of the last 30 HSR filings that have come in since Macon made that point, all of them cleared in 6 months. So maybe there's some acceleration there at DOJ, but again, point to next stage, 18 months. United Health, DaVita Medical Group has been on for 15 months. Right. I mean, these deals are taking absolutely forever. If we're sitting here a couple years from now talking about merger review timing, do you see things picking up? Do you think this is a short-term trend, or when we're sitting here in 2020, are we talking about 24-month merger reviews or longer?
So I think the answer to that question is there's going to be a confluence. The DOJ is not going to keep a record of 6 months, and I don't necessarily think that the next head of the antitrust division, whenever that person might come in, I don't think that person's going to necessarily we can't assume that person's going to put a premium on finishing in 6 months. So I think the review period at DOJ will extend, right. And I think that the review period at the FTC will decrease. I think we'll see fewer deals that take 18, 17, 16 months, and probably more that take around 9 months to a year. Right. I think at the end of the day, the agency can probably make a determination as to whether or not it wants to clear or challenge a transaction within 9 to 12 months.
One would think. And look, you could let it close and take a retrospective look a couple years later and figure out that.
Right. Obviously, they don't want to do that because they obviously don't want to impair their ability to have a remedy. But I do think 9 to 12 months is probably what we're looking at. And then you have to ask yourself, does that even really matter? The European Commission, yes. China at SAMR, are taking longer than 12 months in a lot of instances. So the agencies might not feel the pressure, and quite frankly, they shouldn't feel the pressure to finish in 12 months if the EC and China are taking 16, 18 months. There's no reason for them to rush if they feel like they need a little bit more time. Someone else is causing the clock to take longer, not them. Now, maybe the U.S. can exercise additional leadership and say, you know, we're finishing in 9 months. You should really try to finish in 9 months, too. I think it's important. Mergers are really made or broken within the first, 6 to 12 months after they're consummated. So you might as well, if you're going to approve them so you can have a higher likelihood of the benefits of the deals being passed on.
Right. No, that's an interesting point. So long story short, DOJ, FTC hope to see some convergence on timing there as far as the behavioral remedy question. That we'll see where that goes.
Exactly.
It's an interesting state of affairs. Scott, I think we'll wrap up with
Okay.
that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again.
I appreciate it. Take care.